Hi, my name is Pablo Requena. I am a guitar maker, luthier, makers of Spanish guitars, classical and flamenco. And in this video, what we're going to see it's one aspect of the fitting of the bindings. And basically, if you have or if you purchase the course that I have available online, which I will leave the link for the website in the description of the video. In that course, I explain how to fit the bindings using what you call the mitres joints for the perfilings. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So I've got these two guitars I'm working on at the moment, and I've got them at the stage where I've got all the rebates cut for being able to receive in the bindings. In the front, you can see I got them ready, and I've got to do a little bit of handwork in this area where the router is not able to do any further than this point. And I've got the slots ready to go, and we have everything ready in the back as well. And this is where we're going to work on today. Here you can see that I need to do some handwork here because the router is not able to do any more than this, and I need to tidy all of this up to look like this one here, where you can see that I've already, with the chisel, I have removed all the excess and I have tidied all of this up, and I've got my mitres here ready to receive the bindings. So this is now ready to go. But what I want to show you, and this is what is not explained in the video, because in the video the system that I do is that I have mitres in all the joints. So I have mitres here, here and here. But for this guitar I'm going to use a slightly different method, which is also very typical of the Spanish construction. So I'll have the mitres at the bottom and here in the inlay. That's fine, that's all the same, and that's plain. I explain in detail how to do that in the video course. But up here what we're going to do is a different system called bee-sting arrangement, which is a little bit similar to how the perfilings are done in a violin, where you have the bindings coming together with a very, very thin point, a bit like a bee sting there for the name. Now here it's a little bit different, but we adopted that name to explain or to describe how this is done. So basically what we're going to do is that the binding, when it comes along here, is not going to join into the perfilings in the middle. We're just going to have an angle finishing off in here. So what I would like to do is to explain how to do that. There's several steps to do that job, and I'm going to try to explain the step by step so that you can do this at home without any problems. So the first thing to do is that when you have all the rebates done, we need to start looking at how to get everything around the heel sorted out so that we can start fitting the bindings. So the first thing to do is that when the guitar is assembled on the mold, you can see that the back, it's always a little bit bigger than it needs to be. So you can see that there is a ledge there, and this part of the back, it's a little bit overhanging of the heel. So the first thing that we need to do is to trim this back to the level of the heel so that everything is 100% flush and the continuation of the heel. I'm not going to do that job because otherwise this video is going to get really too long. So I just want to do the jobs that I think are very important, and I want you to see how they're done. But these ones is really kind of much more basic. So I'm just going to explain what you need to do, and then you do them in your own way. So that's the first thing, to trim this little overhanging of the back so that the area where it's covering the heel is completely flush with the heel. Then you also need to tidy up these corners here, because there is also a little bit of overhang here. It might not show very well in the video, but it is there. So I want to make sure that all of this is completely flush, and this edge it's also completely flush. So flush to the side and flush to the heel. Once we have done that, then we need to have a very clear corner at the base of the heel. That's very important, because that's going to be the beginning of where we need to start taking measurements. And what we will do is that we're going to take a measurement from that corner to one of these lines, whichever one you decide. But whichever one you go for, you need to use the other one to take it as a reference for the other side. So the bottom line is that the distance from this corner to the purflings needs to be exactly the same in both sides. At this stage, I'm not going to worry too much if the heel needs a little bit more work. If it's symmetrical already, great. You could do that at this stage, which usually I do. So basically what I do is that I get the shape of the heel as perfect as I can before I go into cutting into the back to fit the purflings. So basically everything needs to be flush, and the heel needs to be shaped so that it's as symmetrical as possible. When you have all the lines, it's really quite easy to see that both sides are symmetrical. So if it's not symmetrical, it's going to really stand out, and you'll be able to realize where you need to do a bit of work to sort it out. And then if one side is a little bit bigger than the other side, then you need to work on the bigger side to make sure that both sides are exactly the same dimension. Because the starting point, which is the shoulder that we make here, needs to be at the same distance for this to work. So once you've done that, then we're going to have a look at this one. So I'm going to put this guitar away for a moment. And now we're going to have a look at what's going on with this guitar here. So basically, I've already done all that work that I've described. The shape of the heel is now defined. This half, it's really very symmetrical to the other half. These lines up here are a very good indication, and everything is completely flush. There's no overhanging in here. And this inner corner is exactly the same as the one that was here. I've already done some work in here. So this point and this point are at the same distance to the center. So that's already ready to go. So what we're going to do is that now we're going to see how to go forward from that point. So the first thing that we're going to do is to do a little bit of work on the bindings themselves, because I'm doing two guitars, I can show you one set and then we'll have a look at the other one. So to be able to fit these bindings, which is basically the binding and the purfling, we need to have the top section already glued together while the rest of it is not glued in. This is all explained in the video and is the same for all guitars, so I'm not really going to spend a lot of time explaining why that is. But what's important for this way of doing the bindings is that this top section, so I would say from the waist to the top, it's from about halfway through, more or less here. And you want to glue all of this so that the purfling is absolutely flush with the binding, because if it's proud, what will happen is that when you fit this in, these lines are not going to touch the side. So you want to make sure that this is completely flush here, so that when this comes down, it will go in with no issues and there will be no gaps down here. So the first thing to do is that we need to see how we're going to glue this together. So that's what it's going to show you. So the first thing to do is to get the right set of binding and purflings, which I've got here. They're completely separate. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to bring the waist together where they fit the most comfortably, and I'm going to bring it into the guitar also to the place where they fit easily. I don't want to have to be putting too much pressure. I just want them to fit well. So what I'm going to do is that with my body, I'm going to lean into it so that I can hold it, and with a pencil I'm going to mark a line more or less in the center of the back. So I got this line which is marking both bindings and purflings together. So now, keeping them both together, what I'm going to do is that I'm gonna cut the ends so that they're completely flush. So I'm gonna use this saw, and I'm just gonna cut to keep it as long as possible, but I just want to trim everything so that it can help me to do this job well, like this. Okay, so I got this one now ready. I'm going to put it to one side. Now what I want to do is to show you this little strip. So what this is just a little strip which basically it has this shape in here. So again, it needs to be reasonably similar to the shape of the shoulder that we got here, but if it's not identical, it's not the end of the world, because when we glue everything together there's going to be a little bit of flexibility. But basically I just want this strip to go about 25 millimeters over the center, and I want it to go just before we come into the waist of the guitar. So that more or less is what we want to have. So all you need to do is to get a piece of plywood, put it in place, get your pencil, mark a pencil line, and take it to the bandsaw and cut that line. And then set up the bandsaw with the fence so that then you can cut this to be about 10 millimeters or 11 millimeters wide. That's all you need. So that way you end up with a strip like this. You can see this is a bit flexible, it's not super strong, but it will do the job very nicely. And you're going to see in a moment what we do with this, because what we're going to do now is that we're going to use this so that we can clamp these two together. And I have my center line in here, and I also have my center line in here. So I'm going to clamp everything together into here so that then I can glue the binding and the preflin together to be able to do this job. And I like to do this at this stage so that while I'm doing everything else, this will be dry by the time I need it, and then I don't need to be sitting around waiting for the glue to dry. So let's glue this very quickly. I'm just going to get a little bit of glue and going to go, so this is where the waist starts and this is the center. So I'm going to go more or less from the middle, maybe a little bit more. So I'm here, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. I don't want to have a huge amount. I just want to have enough to know that I can cover the whole surface, but I don't want to have a huge amount of glue that is just going to make a mess of everything, and it's just going to make things more difficult. Then with my finger I can spread everything, and I only need glue in one of the pieces, so I don't need to have glue in the other one as well. Now I'm going to line everything up into here, and resting on the bench, and with this one, now I'm going to make the center line to line up with the line that I made there. That's important because I want the waist and everything else to fit in well. And pushing flush and flat into the bench, that's how I'm going to manage to get everything to be flush together. Then I'm going to use these grips to hold everything together as a clamp. So I'm going to put one over there and then another one over here and another one in here. Again, I'm just making sure that everything is nice and flush by pushing it into the bench. And now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to put a few of these grips, oops, on this side, so I can put one in here as well, and I can put another one in here as well. And then I'm just going to check that this is nice and flush, and yes it is, I'm happy with that. And I'm just going to put one here. So I'm just going to leave this to one side. There's another one to do, but I'll do that later because I just want to show you how I do this one. But yes, I have to do the same on the other set. And basically I'm just going to put this to one side, and then by the time I need it, it will be ready. Okay, so I'm going to turn my attention back to the guitar again. So what we've done off camera is what I explained before. I squared everything up here so that I ended up having this shoulder neatly done, and this little bit of the back is completely flush here, and all of this, and it was the same in the other side. But basically the first stage to be able to do the beastings is to continue this rebate all the way to meet the base of the heel, basically like I've done here. So at the moment I want to keep everything square like that one. So let's have a look and see how to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is to help me to do this well. What I'm going to do is to put a little bit of masking tape right on that edge, and also right on the edge of this rebate, and then I'm just going to fold the excess of the tape into the rebate in there. So that is telling me that I need to cut all of this without touching this tape. And then I'm also going to have a little bit of masking tape, and I'm going to bring it just in line with the base of the heel, so that basically this is just exposing the amount of material that I need to remove to fit the bindings. Now what I've done is that from the other binding and so on that I've been doing, I've got a couple of offcuts here. So this is a little bit of an offcut of the bindings, and this is a little bit of an offcut of the purflings. And basically when I have these two together and I bring it here, this is completely flush in there. So the idea is that in the same way that this is flush here, I want to be able to get all the way into here, and this needs to stay completely flush in there. So this is also going to be helpful to know that I've got everything done properly here. So let's get on with that, and let's do it. So to do that, I'm going to use a chisel. So you need to have a very sharp chisel, and for me this one is a 13mm chisel. You can use one bigger or smaller if it works for you. This is the one that I'm going to use, which I think is going to work very well. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to start nibbling away at all of this, but one thing that you want to do is to make sure that you don't start all the way down here, because if you start all the way down resting on this edge, what will happen is that in the end you will end up cutting in more than you need to. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to cut about 1.5 millimeters or so away from that edge. So I'm just going to make a mark here so that you can see. So you can see my cut here, and that means that I'm going to start cutting along there, and I'm going to leave a little bit of material here to finish it off once the bulk of all of this is gone. Because if I start cutting this line but all the way down into the tape, in the end this will end up cutting in. Because what's happening is that it doesn't matter how sharp your chisel is, at the end of the day this is a wedge, and if the wood has got nowhere to go because it's too thick, what it's doing is pushing the chisel inwards, so you're going to end up cutting more than you need to. So it's always a good idea to do it in stages. So let's do it. So I cut a little bit from here, then a little bit from the base, and then a little bit this way. There we are. Then I can do a little bit more, and in here. So you can see I need to lean in quite a bit because this is quite tough. So what I've done is I've clamped the guitar by the neck here on the bench, but over here I've got this piece of wood with a bit of cork there so that I'm not going to damage anything. But basically this is supporting the guitar so that I can push here without having the guitar moving around. So this is important because you want to make sure that what you're doing here and the guitar that you're working on is really very steady into the bench so that you can cut this safely. So now flat into here, and again, there we are. We are cutting the end grain of the rosewood as well, so it is pretty tough depending on where you cut. So it's tough to cut along here, but then when you cut down here, you're cutting along the grain, so that it's a little bit softer. So you have to be a little bit more careful that you're not going to ruin anything. And then into here. There we are. So a little bit more. And a little bit more. Okay. So we're getting a little bit closer to the heel now, so we have to be a little bit more careful to make sure that we're not going to end up cutting into the heel. Sometimes also you do a little bit of tapping at the back of the chisel. It's quite useful. So a little bit more. So now I'm going to use a much wider chisel because I want to be able to rest most of the chisel in the shoulder that I've got here, so that I cut this at the right height, like so. Okay, and now I can go back to the other chisel. So now I'm going to rest the chisel into the heel, and there we are. Okay, so now we have the bulk of that material out of the way, but it's not deep enough here. We don't need to check this, I just want to do that so that you can see it, but basically now we need to remove all of this so that this ends up being flush in here. So this is where a sharp chisel is important, and we're just going to cut thin slices and because we have removed most of what's here, as we cut the slices, they can come out this way without pushing the chisel into here, and that's how we can control that the chisel doesn't cut farther than we want to. So I'm just gonna tidy this up a little bit. And now with these two pieces I bring them in place, and this is now completely flush in here. So I'm very happy that all of this now is the continuation of this rebate and is the same size. So now we're ready to cut the actual space where it's going to house the beasting, which we're going to cut in the binding and perfilings together. Right, so to do this job, what we're going to do is that I'm going to do a very basic layout of what I want to do, so that then it's easier to follow. I need to get a ruler here. So here I'm just going to make one line to follow actually the tape. I could follow the tape, but I prefer to have a line in here. like this. There. And also what I'm going to do, I need this knife, is to trim off this excess of tape. There, like that, because I want to see this corner into here nicely. Right, so that's done. Now I need to have a mark up here, which is basically where the very bottom of the corner of the heel is. So I'm going to bring that up to the top in there, and I've got this mark here. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to do an angle that I think it will work, and I'm just going to do this by eye. Of course, this first one is always very easy to do. The one that is a little bit more tricky is the other one, because we have to make sure that they're both the same angle, depth and size and everything else. So that's more or less what we're going to be cutting. So like before, I'm not going to start cutting at the base and at the top of the line. I'm just going to cut only in the middle here. I'm going to cut a little bit, and then I'm going to cut a little bit this way. This is a little fiddly, and there's not a lot of room for the wood to go. So we need to start by creating, actually I'm going to remove the tape at the top. So I'm just going to do that and that, because that is going to help me a little bit, because the tape is going to be interfering with what I'm doing. There you are. So I need to cut a little bit here and a little bit there. There and there. And then with a knife, this one is quite pointy, so it's rather convenient. You can also use a scalpel or anything that it's sharp and that you can get into here, because we need to be able to cut the wood at the base. And you can see that's jumped and come out. So now that I've got this beginning of the beasting, I can make it a little bit bigger at the time until it gets exactly to the dimension that I want. There we are. And now from here, like that. And now I'm going to cut again with the scalpel. Careful not to break the tip inside, because then it's just going to interfere with what you do. And now I can cut, resting the chisel on the edge that I have here to do the final cut. And that's it. And then the same here, I want to get right into that corner, and here I can eyeball it, but basically I get this edge to continue with this line, so I need to get the angle right here, like so. Okay, so let's remove this out here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is to remove the tape only on this half, because I want to be able to mark this out in the other half. So I'm just going to use the chisel so that I can lift up the tape. Like that. And like that. Okay, so yeah, I can see in here that I need to define a little bit more this very tip, because I want that to be super sharp. So a little bit this way without changing the angle, but just cutting that little bit that is left in there. And of course it's always a little bit tricky to remove all the wood that is inside here, but if you have a nice sharp knife with a little bit of patience, we can clean all of this, because otherwise when we fit the bindings and the perfilings into here, it just won't go in. But I'm happy with this at the moment, so if we need to do any more cleaning, we'll see that in a moment. Right, so that's as much as I'm going to do in here at the moment. What I'm going to do is on this arrangement that I've got here now for the perfiling and the binding, which they stack together, and this is why I need to stick them together, because to be able to work on this more easily, I need to have them as a unit. If they were independent from each other, it's possible to do it, but then you'll have two pieces to deal with and it'll be more complicated. So what I'm going to do is that this was left long on purpose, because what I want to do is to do one initial cut, see how it fits, and if I need to do any adjustments, I want to have enough material here so that I can play about with it until it fits really well. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do one initial cut, and I'm going to see how it fits, and if it fits, great. If it doesn't, then I can adjust it. So the way that we're going to do this is that with your fingers, you're going to hold this piece down really firmly, and you need to have the thumb available to help you with the chisel. So bring the thumb into the bench, the chisel needs to be already vertical, and you're going to cut a little bit at a time. I'm going to do it like this so that perhaps it shows a little bit better. Like that. Okay, and this is just a guess. It might fit, it might not, I don't know. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to bring it into the section that I prepared here, and you can see that it's not a good fit because this is very open over here. So what it means is that I need to modify this angle a little bit, but now that I've got an initial angle there, I can see what I need to do. So all I'm going to do is that I'm going to do it over here, which there's a little bit more light and perhaps it might show better. So what I need to do is the same. Hold the piece down with your fingers, lift your chisel and your thumb available for the chisel, and now what I'm going to do is I memorized more or less the angle that I needed. So once I've got it like that, let's try again. And that is a much nicer fit, but I can see that it's not 100% flat here. I've got like two facets, so I want to have only one. So I'm going to bring it back to here and I'm going to do one more cut. And this is why this needs to be a bit longer than we need to, because it takes a bit of time. That's it. And then the other thing is that you want this edge to be as perpendicular as possible. If you have a big angle, that also is not going to work. So let's bring it over here, and that fits really, really well. So now all that is left to do is, before I commit to cut all of this to length, because all I need to do is to just cut a little bit more so that this fits in here and the waist is in the right place. So when this is in the right place and this is fitting here, then we can deal with the rest of it, which is not something that I'm going to show in this video because we don't need to. My idea today is just to show you how to do the job up here. So the idea is that now that we know that this fits and it goes in really well, I'm going to leave it a little bit long. And what we're going to do is that we're going to set up the guitar the other way. So I'm going to unclamp everything. Well, you're going to do that because I think this is more or less all I'm going to do for the video, but I want to explain how you can do the other side. So you're going to set up the guitar the other way so that you can work in the other side. And what you need to do is to, in this part of the tape that we got here, you're going to lay out exactly the same thing that we've done here, and you're going to do it there. And then with the other binding, or with the other setup of binding and purfling together, you're going to do the same thing that we've done here. And then you're going to cut the house for the other beasting, and you're going to make sure that they're both exactly the same. Now, when you do the second one, if it's identical, then that's great, that's the idea. If it's not, you might have to modify one or the other one until you get them as identical as possible. The way that you know if it works and if they're identical is that because this one fits in here really well, if you get this one and fit it in the other side and it fits really well, then you know that they're the same. But also, you want to take a dimension. So looking up close here, I'm going to bring the light. You get your caliper and you take a dimension from this inner corner to the first line. And what you want to do, I'm going to take this off because I can put it on again later, but it will be easier to see what I want to explain. So this little corner needs to be at the same distance to these lines in both sides. If that is the same and this is in line with this edge here, then everything is going to look perfect. And then basically, once you know that these two cutouts for the beastings are identical and this one fits in both sides, then you're going to work in the other one until you have both of them fitted. And then when you are happy that both of them fits really well, then that's where you're going to start trimming this back until this fits in here perfectly. The waist is in the right place, and all you want to do here is that this needs to be much longer than you need to. And like I said, we're not going to look at how to do this because this is all being explained in the course online. So if you're interested, you can buy the course and learn it from there, or if you don't want to buy the whole course, you can just buy the chapters about how to fit the bindings, and everything is explained in detail. And basically, this is the way that you do this detail, and this is as much as I'm going to do, otherwise the video is going to get too long. But I really think that with what I've shown you today, you've got all the info that you need to be able to do this job really well. So this is another alternative to do this arrangement for the joint between the purflings, the bindings and the heel. It looks beautiful, and it's a very traditional Spanish way of doing this. Many top-end Spanish guitars have this done in this way. So if you have any questions, please just don't hesitate to send me a comment in the comment box underneath the video. And until the next time, I hope you find this video helpful, and see you on the next time.